Juan, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Interviews from Caracas. Well, we know the presidential elections in Argentina are coming up on October 25th. Firstly, tell me what you think about the candidates.
Argentina's 2015 presidential elections had three leading candidates, the first one being the ruling party candidate, Daniel Scioli, the second one, the main conservative opposition candidate, Mauricio Macri, and placed at a distant third, there is Sergio Massa, a congressman of the province of Buenos Aires, who is now making a run for the presidential office. Certainly, the two leading candidates are Daniel Scioli and Mauricio Macri, whose candidacies represent the same dispute seen in other Latin American countries that have post-neoliberal governments. That is, the clash between those who want to continue a project that achieved so many accomplishments in most of Latin American nations during the last 10 years, especially in Argentina under the guidance of the Front for Victory ruling party, and those who want to follow a conservative and fundamentally neoliberal project, which is the project promoted by Mauricio Macri, who is also the current mayor of the city of Buenos Aires. Either way, we will have to wait until the presidential elections are held this October 25th to see the settlement of the dispute. The outcome of the Argentina's elections will determine most of this year, 2015, regional geopolitics of Latin America. Last year, 2014, was characterized by the victory of post-neoliberal alternatives in the region, such as the Workers' Party in Brazil, the Broad Front in Uruguay, and the Movement for Socialism in Bolivia. So, considering last year's geopolitical outlook, we might expect the victory of the Front for Victory Party in the upcoming elections in Argentina to continue the wave of electoral victories by post-neoliberal projects in Latin America.
Let's focus on Daniel Scioli, who is the presidential candidate for the Front for Victory Party, which is currently led by Cristina Fernandez, who's the outgoing president because she can't run for another term. He's leading at the polls. What do you attribute to his popularity and his leading at the polls?
Él principalmente lidera las encuestas.
Daniel Scioli is leading the polls mainly because he represents the continuity of the process of reform started in Argentina in 2003 and the maintaining of the Front for Victory Party as the ruling party of the country, but also because, according to surveys conducted, most Argentinians don't want to lose what they have accomplished in the last decades under the Kirchner's rule, including expansion of state intervention in the economy and more access to housing, education, and healthcare as a result of a better income distribution. Those are some of the points that make Scioli such a strong candidate. Scioli also provides economic predictability. With him in the presidential office, there shouldn't be major altercations to the macroeconomic policies of the country. All those facts have an impact over a presidential election, and that's why we may see a great part of the population supporting him in order to continue the process of reform started in 2003. He, however, might not reach an approval rating reached by Cristina Fernandez in 2011. But such ratings have more to do with the historical leadership and the charm displayed by the candidates than with anything else. Nonetheless, there is no doubt that Scioli had good results during these primaries, where he won 38% of the votes counted, meaning that he is close to achieve 40% of the vote required to win the presidential elections in the first round. But let's wait and see how everything goes in the following weeks before the elections.
Que quedan hasta las elecciones presidenciales, el panorama se va a aclarar un poquito más en ese sentido.
Now, a lot of the victory of the Front for Victory Party, which they've been experiencing, led by Cristina Fernandez, a lot of it is based on the leadership of a previous president, Nestor Kirschner. Who was this guy?
Nestor Kirschner ruled Argentina during a difficult time of the country, from 2003 to 2007. Argentina was going through a really hard time resulted of the neoliberal policies implemented by the Alliance, the ruling party at the time. The Alliance government ended in 2001, but the country was left in a difficult economic position. The poverty levels were really high, and the unemployment rate was above 25%. But Nestor Kirschner started to change the situation. He also took severe political measures regarding human rights, such as the reopening of trials for the massive human rights abuses committed during the military dictatorship. Such policies were of great importance. President Nestor Kirchner also managed to stabilize the economy. Argentina experienced significant economic growth under his presidency, due also to the increase of exports, even during a time when China was one of the world's largest exporters. Latin American integration was also one of the greatest achievements of Nestor Kirchner. He, along with Lula da Silva and Hugo Chavez, refused to accept the Free Trade Agreement area of the Americas, the FTAA, during the Mar del Plata summit. That was a milestone in the history of Latin America's fight for autonomy. They stood up against the American imperialism. They didn't give up their nation's sovereignty to the Americans. They rejected imposition of economic measures on Latin America because they considered that Latin America itself should be the one to design its own economic policies. Rejecting the FTAA was part of Kirchner's legacy, part of his legacy of regional integration, along with the creation of UNASUR, the Union of South American Nations. He was actually the first UNASUR Secretary General, and he guided the organization during the diplomatic crisis between Colombia and Venezuela when former Colombian President Álvaro Uribe threatened the government of Hugo Chavez.
Now, the previous president, former president Nestor Kirschner, he was a mayor, a governor, a president. He was for the people. He believed in regional integration and something called viable capitalism. And he was so popular that a term was coined, Kirchnerism or Kirchnerismo. What is this Kirchnerismo?
Kirchnerism is a political movement that derives from Peronism, which was a previous political movement that took place in Argentina. The Peronist ideal was based on social justice, economic distribution, and, above all, sovereignty. That is, Argentina's right to follow its own political, economic, and social path. Kirchnerism emerged as a byproduct of Peronism, but also as a convergence of other political sectors, such as left-wing, progressive, and national and popular sectors. Nowadays, the Kirchnerist movement continues to gain currency in Argentina, despite the death of its leader Nestor Kirchner in 2010. The leadership of President Cristina Fernandez helped to continue Kirchner's legacy. She was not only Kirchner's wife, but she was also and continued to be one of the most influential politicians of Latin America. She continued the integration efforts of Nestor Kirchner by encouraging the formation of the CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, which was created in Caracas in 2011, a year after Kirchner's death. President Cristina Fernandez joined efforts with the post-neoliberal governments of Evo Morales, Rafael Correa, Hugo Chavez, and Nicolás Maduro to carry on Kirchner's work on integration. Kirchnerism embarked Argentina on a new integration period and made the Argentinian people to take more interest in approaching Latin America than the United States.
Cuya una buena parte de sus habitantes solía mirar siempre a Estados Unidos y a Europa, mirara nuevamente a América Latina.
Back in 2003, when he became president, it was a different time. How different was the political and social landscape back in 2003 as opposed to now in 2016?
Bueno, no, la política económica cambió fuertemente, es decir, si uno maneja los parámetros.
Well, the economic policy changed drastically. In 2001, there was a high unemployment rate. 56% of the population were living in poverty. 5 out of 10 Argentinians lived in poor and miserable conditions. And that situation changed thanks to Kirchner's initiative to boost the domestic market and the industrialization process of the country. Money from exports started to enter the country, and Kirchner allocated that money to social programs such as the Universal Child Allowance and many other social and public work programs. Some people might call them social plans, but I don't like that term because it diminishes their value. They are not simply plans, they are social programs aimed at providing assistance to vulnerable population. That's why today Kirchnerism has such a strong popular acceptance and support in Argentina, even though Cristina Fernandez cannot run for another term, because unlike other movements in Latin America, Kirchnerism hasn't implemented constitutional reforms to allow President Cristina to run for a third term. But if she could run, she would win with an overwhelming majority, I think. But we have instead Daniel Scioli as the front-running candidate of the ruling party, and Carlos Zanini on his ticket as vice president. Carlos Zanini is a political leader that has been a supporter of Kirchnerism since the 1970s. So, the idea of this presidential ticket is to continue the legacy of the Kirchners. But we'll have to wait for the October elections result to actually see how they are going to do once in office.
Back to the present, Cristina Fernandez's government has a lot of control of the economy in Argentina, and Daniel Scioli has said that he will gradually change those policies that she has implemented. What is he talking about? What does he mean, and how is he going to do that?
There is still some debate whether the economic policies implemented by the government of Cristina Fernandez should continue to be in place or not. Scioli will try to maintain the increase in Argentina's purchasing power enabled by Kirchner's policies. Scioli has also pledged to reduce inflation rates. We have to wait to see how he will manage to do that. I don't particularly believe this, but some analysts argue that increasing consumption might increase inflation rates. There is another factor. Some Latin American countries are devaluating their currencies, so Argentina will be facing the same question of devaluating its currency. We need to take into account that a devaluation is not always well received because those hit the most are the workers and the vulnerable population. But we will soon see what will be the macroeconomic choices of Scioli in that regard. He has already said, and this is something that is widely accepted at a government level, that we cannot go back or left behind our economic gains. If he tries to put forward economic policies similar to those in place in Argentina in the past, then the Argentinian population will question him and challenge these policies.
And Scioli is getting some endorsements from regional players like Evo Morales from Bolivia, the former Brazilian President Lula da Silva. In your personal opinion, do you think he's ready to take Argentina into the future?
Well, as part of the current Argentinian government, Daniel Scioli is doing his best as to forge ties with the rest of the continent. Undoubtedly, Lula da Silva's visit to Argentina, as well as Bolivia's President Evo Morales, and the good relations Scioli has with some other post-neoliberal Latin American leaders allow us to foresee a continuation of the integration process in Latin America, not only when it comes to economics, but also in a broader context. Now, Argentina plays an important role in UNASUR, the Union of South American Nations, the CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, and now it is likely to be an observant in the ALBA Group, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America. Overall, there are good relations with post-neoliberal governments mainly. As I just said, there is a UNASUR, the CELAC, and there are also good relations with the G77 plus China, the United Nations, and the BRICS group. The role of Argentina in all these organizations is part of the legacy left by Nestor Kirschner, a process of integration with emerging powers, different from previous integration processes. In the 90s, neoliberal governments and Argentina turned to Europe or the United States. But now Argentina will not be subordinated to foreign interests they tried to do with the free trade agreement, the free trade area of the Americas.
Well, if Scioli wins, it will not be easy for him. There will be challenges, just like they were for Kirchner, just like they were for Fernandez. The unions are against them. What exactly were the unions against? And do you think Daniel Scioli can unite Argentina to take it into the future?
Daniel Scioli intends to build up a popular majority that is the result of the Kirchnerism. He has a more moderate approach with the opposition, which will have both positive and negative consequences. I like the way President Cristina Fernandez does politics. She is an outspoken leader. Whenever she has to take a posture, she does. If she is to take a stand against the vulture funds, she does. If she has to say that the media is lying about a certain topic, she says so. I think we need this kind of government, so the population is shown a general outlook. However, Daniel Scioli is more a moderate politician. He doesn't take a tough stand on such issues. He may not question the media's role in politics as President Cristina Fernandez does. But still, he is part of a political platform and he remains promoting that political project. If elected, he will have to continue with it. If he had not agreed with the main policies of Kirchnerism, he would have gone out of the government and would have been a part of another political party. However, he decided to be part of Kirchnerism. Thus, he will have to comply with the policies put in place by the Kirchnerism. Nowadays, the Argentinian youth is organized. Thanks to the organizations such as the Evita movement, the Solidarity Party, and several organizations that joined together to provide the Kirchnerism with a political power. Therefore, Daniel Scioli will have the support of such organizations, as long as he continues with the policies put in place in the two previous governments. I cannot imagine that he will have the support of these organizations in the event he promotes policies that are contrary to those of the Kirchnerism. I don't think it happens, but in the event he joins the TISA negotiations, the Trade in Service Agreement that is being discussed, he will be undoubtedly challenged by the grassroots organizations, because he would be acting contrary to what happened 10 years ago when our leaders said no to the FTAA, the Free Trade Area of the Americas.
Let's touch on the Argentinian opposition for a while. There are a lot of people behind the opposition in Argentina to win. What is the opposition offering Argentinians that Scioli is not?
The Argentinian opposition is facing a bigger challenge if you compare it with the opposition in general in Latin America, because most of the opposition parties in Latin America have taken a tough stand against the post-neoliberal governments, and yet they say they will apply some of the policies of these post-neoliberal governments. For example, in Venezuela, you heard of Enrique Capriles saying he was going to continue with the social missions of the Bolivarian Revolution, but you cannot be sure about it because he said so at a time he was not president. It was a hypothesis. He did so to gain empathy ahead of elections. Now we hear of Mauricio Macri in Argentina saying he will continue with the social programs. Universal allocation per son. He said that the oil state company WPF will remain state-owned company, as well as the Argentine Airlines will continue to be a state-owned company. Mauricio Macri says every company that was nationalized will remain so, which is contrary to what he said 3 or 4 years ago, when he assured that he was going to privatize them. He and his party voted against the nationalization of these companies, and here we notice a change in his discourse that is related with the acceptance of these measures by most of the Argentinian people. The opposition is in disagreement on whether they should continue with these measures or not, and this is an opposition that is not only confined to Argentina, but that is also associated with different opposition groups of Latin America.
And there are corruption scandals circling some of the opposition. Do you think that will hurt their chances of winning?
The Argentinian opposition has always criticized the Kirchner's government for sponsoring social programs. So, they used alleged cases of corruption to undermine the government. That's the same strategy used by the opposition in Venezuela, Bolivia, and Ecuador. The latest corruption scandal was involving Fernando Miembro, who was the first candidate to Congress of the Pro Party for the province of Buenos Aires. There were found 20 million pesos in public work contracts awarded to Miembro. 20 million pesos will account for around $2 million. This scandal surfaced in recent weeks in Argentina, having a profound impact in the country's politics, including the presidential campaign. And it is hard to believe that Mauricio Macri was not aware of this when it was his administration awarding the illegal contracts. Fernando Miembro decided to withdraw his candidacy. But I think this situation will make people question the Pro Party. A scandal of this sort, few months before elections, harmed the campaign of the Pro Party. They might need to change their strategy. They replaced Fernando Miembro in order to still try to win the elections, but they continue to be way behind Scioli according to the polls. And this corruption scandal is not helping them.
Now, there's still some time between now and October 25th. Personal question. Who do you think is going to become the next Argentinian president? And who would you want to become the next Argentinian president?
Me parece que el escenario, al quedar en las primarias abiertas, simultáneas, obligatorias, una elección con una diferencia de 8 puntos, que es el porcentual entre la candidatura de Daniel Scioli y la candidatura de
After the primary elections in Argentina, there was an 8% gap between Daniel Scioli and Mauricio Macri. I think this might continue and the gap could be actually wider. And it is an interesting result because if Kirchnerism and their candidate Daniel Scioli and Carlos Zanini win 41% of the vote and the opposition wins 30% or less of the vote, there will be an 11% gap that will lead to the victory of the Front for Victory Party in the first round. I think it is likely to happen. I also think that the opposition already knows that they cannot win the elections and they will bring about conflict and destabilization, and they will say there was fraud in the result. You saw what happened in the Tucumán province. Secondly, they could try what happened in Brazil. Try to have a second round with lower gap to try to put pressure on the government, so they put forward different economic and social policies. We have to wait. I'm not saying it is going to happen, but I think Daniel Scioli is likely to win the first round, and he will therefore continue with the project that started back in 2003.
Me parece que las cartas ya están saldadas en un punto y que es posible esperar, no digo que suceda, pero es posible esperar un triunfo de Daniel Scioli en la primera vuelta para que continúe aquel proyecto de cambio iniciado en el año 2003.
And personal question, who do you want to be the next Argentinian president?
A ver, yo creo que lo mejor para América Latina
Well, I think the best for Argentina is a victory for Daniel Scioli. The political and economic alliances that he built up in the last decade could be hampered in the event Mauricio Macri wins the elections. In the case of UNASUR, there would be another conservative government as well as in the CELAC, and Daniel Scioli will continue with this process of Latin American integration forged under the Nestor and Cristina Fernandez governments. That in a regional context, but also in a domestic scenario. There are two models, one that intends to continue with social policies put in place by the Kirchnerism, and a model that wants to end or to limit such policies. Because regardless of what they say now, we remember what they said in the past, and you see that their ideas are related to neoliberalism. In this context, the best for Argentina and the region will be the victory of Daniel Scioli.
Juan, it's great getting your perspective. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We hope to have you back in the future sometime. You've been looking at interviews from Caracas. We hope to see you next time. Bye.